What's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 41 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of immigrant mental health with our very special guest of the week, Carol. Be sure to go follow Carol over on social media. Her TikTok is Blondie Pepper. That is BLONDIEPEPPER. Make sure to go check her out after the episode and show her some support for being on this episode. And remember, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in our Discord and the podcast participants channel along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. And just a quick disclaimer before we start, I am not a licensed health professional. This podcast seeks to create community and further understanding of these topics that are so often overlooked and extremely misunderstood. If you or a loved one are in need of medical professional help, we have resources in our description. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. So today we're going to be talking about immigrant mental health, which I believe is one of the most overlooked mental health crises in the world. So what is immigrant mental health? But before we do that, we gotta get into like a little resource real quick. For those of us in the US, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is 988. You can call them anytime, day or night. They are open 24/7, okay? And services are free and always confidential. So again, if you are in crisis, please call 988 or call 911. You can also call 911 anywhere and it will route you to your local emergency number. Immigrants often experience trauma at various stages of the migration process, before, during, and after. It's a very stressful process to move in general. Like even if you're in the United States, I just moved. I think it's 40 miles away from where I have lived for the past 2 years with my fiance. We just moved into our house. And that was a very stressful process, let me tell you. But to move to a whole nother country with a whole different culture that speaks a whole nother language, it is very stressful. No matter if you're moving for, more financial opportunities, or if you're moving to be closer to other family, it's extremely, extremely stressful. You can face racism and discrimination when you move, and other stigma. Social isolation is a really big one that we're going to be getting into in this episode with Carol, because she moved from Brazil. Okay, she moved from Brazil to the United States for a while because she was an au pair. And then she moved to Italy, where she is trying to get her citizenship. So we're going to be discussing all of the ups and downs that she went through as an immigrant, and as an immigrant that she's still going through. So viewer discretion is really advised in this episode. We get into a lot of nitty gritty. If you ever need to take a break, get a drink of something. Usually you should drink some water, but I've had like 4 water bottles today, so I decided to give myself a little treat. Take a break if you ever need to, if things are getting a little bit too real for you. I know that these episodes should always be watched with, the utmost discretion of your own mental health. And if you like what we're doing here over on the podcast, please hit that like button and subscribe and click the post notification bell so you get a notification every time we post. But we post every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. But sometimes we have a little treat in there every so often. So if you want to get notifications, please press that bell. And if you like what we're doing here over on the Trauma Dump Podcast, please share it with your friends. It really helps us out a lot, and it helps the channel grow, it helps you grow, and it helps more people become trauma informed. Now, let's get into this episode. Okay.
Oh,
Hello. Fireworks? Okay.
hi. Yeah, I did the like thumbs up. It just started happening. Oh my God, it happened again. Ah,
Before we start the interview, are you comfortable
yeah.
with sharing your personal experiences?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And to make sure that I'm not crossing any of your boundaries and respecting your experiences, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. And we can also take a break at any time if, things are getting a little bit uncomfy. And if you don't feel like answering a question, please tell me to skip it. All right? Because my priority is to
Okay.
make sure that you
Yes.
feel safe at all times.
Thank you. I love that. That's very nice.
Well, thank you for coming on. So, you wanted to talk about immigrant mental health. Can you unpack that for me? Why was that your topic that you wish to discuss?
So I could when I saw like you saying how I on TikTok was like trauma dump, I was like I could talk about literally so many traumas that I've had because I have had like a crazy childhood, a crazy just 1 year and a half ago, I decided to move from my hometown there, spend most of my life there. I decided to move to the US. Then I lived 1 year in the US, 6 months now. So I had never really understood the magnitude, like how truly insane and exhausting it is to move countries. Especially this last time because I've always had English lessons since I was a kid. I was very fortunate that my parents, since I was 3 years old, they were like, "You're gonna learn because it's gonna be good for your future." And I came to Italy without knowing anything, and I've had just a really hard time um, connecting with people that are not also immigrants in the sense of, I'll call my mom. I'm very close to my mom, and I'll be like, "Mom, I had such a hard day, like," and she'll be like, "Oh, but you're in Italy, like or like, oh, you're in the US, so like, how can it be that hard? Because it's supposed to be, the dream. Like, it's supposed to be, when you have to express that, be like, Mom, seasonal depression is a thing. Like I've never experienced winter like I did because I lived in New Jersey." Um, and I just think it's really important, and I don't think people know or talk enough about the fact that um, being an immigrant is not just going to Italy, going to the US, visiting this, seeing that, you know?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. When you're moving to a new place, it's so much change all at once, especially when you bring in like the factors of their culture could be very different, the language could be very different. Um, you could move to a place where there aren't as many people your age. Climate can be really different. You were talking about seasonal depression, seasonal affective disorder. I talked about it with my friend Kat. It really rocks your world to be in a whole new climate and like experience winter. Oh my goodness. I think when I was
Oh God,
like
yes.
yeah, when I was 15 or 16, around that age, I grew up in like the Christian church. And so my church was like, oh, we're going to go to Boston to evangelize. And I was like, aren't there Christians in Boston? Why do we have to go to Boston? But we went. We went for like a week and a half. And while we were in Boston, it was really like the most snow that I'd ever seen in my entire life. The snow was so piled high, like I could stand next to a snow pile and it was as tall as me and I was like 5 feet tall. And it was so cold. And the sun went, it was springtime. So it was this time like a couple years ago. So I thought, oh, it'll be like spring in Texas. I was so wrong. And at first I thought, oh, it's so pretty. It's so nice here. But people in Boston are not very nice, especially not very nice to little teenagers trying to evangelize them. And I'm not a Christian anymore, wouldn't consider myself one. But as soon as I got back to Texas, I fell into like this huge depression of being like, I hated where I was, how I don't ever want to do that again. I told my dad, I was like, I don't ever want to go on a mission trip again. He's like, What? What are you talking about? You just had a bad one. You'll be fine. And I don't know. I hated it. But tell me about your winter depression when you were in New Jersey.
So, the first thing I think it's important to say is that I went to be an au pair. Do you know what an au pair is? Because
A
many people have no
nanny! A
idea.
nanny!
I am
Yeah.
I was an au pair to two boys. Um, one is 12 now or 13. One is 13 already. One is 13 and the other is 10. When I got there, they were 9 and 12. And I lived with them. So, when you're au pair, you live with the family. And it was late summer when I arrived. It was early September. And they warned me multiple times. They were like, Carol, so winter is tough. And I was like, okay, it can't be like that tough. Must be cool, to see the snow, to see things like that. And when winter came, I realized that my host mom, she told me like, oh, our oldest gets seasonal depression. It's like it happens to some people. It might happen to you. So let me know if you need anything. I was very lucky that they were a great family. And I spent 3 months without pretty much leaving the house. It was one of the craziest feelings I've ever had, and I just experienced again because it was winter here in Italy too. Very different because it's warmer, but and I've been dealing with depression and anxiety my entire life. It's like my anxiety, I've been diagnosed. I do therapy for 5 years now, and all that, but it's very different from I think my normal depression. So it was a completely new experience. It's like I had unlocked a new level of depression, a different type of depression, if that makes any sense. Because I didn't understand. I was in the place that I always wanted to be, right next to New York City, which is, you know, in South America and especially in Brazil, we're very sold the idea of the American dream because on television we see the movies, so we see like the Christmas movies where everyone's having fun in the snow and everything seems perfect. So when I was there, I was like, okay, why isn't everything perfect? Why am I not happy? Why can't I get out of bed? And I had no other option because I had to work. I had to take care of the kids, I had to drive, and it was 3 months of me not being able to leave the bed, not, I us Brazilians were very obsessed with hygiene, like because I think mostly because we live in a country that is constantly hot. It's always hot. So like I used to take 2 showers a day. Every single day it was like 2 showers, and I realized I was taking like one every 2 days, which is something that I had never done in my life. The point that like not feeling the want to get clean and take a shower like I did back home. And I was eating so much more. I was just, I, whenever I had free time, I was sleeping, I was napping. And it's like feeling that plus being away from home and everyone that you know and love and care, it's very isolating. So it just accumulates with the fact that like you are depressed and you have no one to really take care of you. And you can go to your host family and be like, oh, guys, I'm depressed. Because there is a big taboo of mental health and just being able to do anything. For example, when you're become doing the process through the agency to become an au pair, you're supposedly not supposed, like, you're not supposed to be on medication or even doing therapy or have ever done therapy because they think that you're, I know, right? I think you're not, they think you're not capable of taking care of kids just because you do therapy or because you um, have anxiety or something diagnosed. So I was super scared of going to them and being like, hey, I'm not okay. I think I need some help, because I was afraid that they would kick me out or that, my exchange program would end.
I
First and foremost, I want to say that I am so sorry that you experienced that fear and that stigma of if you go to therapy, you're obviously not capable because it's the exact opposite. If you're going to therapy, that means that you want to be more capable and you're putting stuff in place so that you can become more capable. So I just want to say that I'm very sorry that you experienced that. And yes, I know what an au pair is. I was a nanny to four boys for 7 years, but
Oh, I love that.
yeah, here in the US. So it wasn't, overseas or anything like that. But, those little dudes, they were a lot. They were always a lot. And I love them and I miss them so very much. But again, I'm so very sorry that you dealt with that because that's honestly it's horrible. It's horrible to go through a crisis like that and have no support. How did you get through it? You said it was for 3 months.
Yeah, it was, I would say, pretty much all throughout December, January, February, maybe even more. My thing is that I'm very glad that I'm an extrovert, so it helps me bond with people and meet people more easily. And there were a lot of other au pairs around me that were also Brazilian. So one came on the same day, same flight as me, and she lived 5 minutes from me by car. And we were all depressed. We were all like in different levels and dealing differently, but we had a group chat and we were like, I was like, I don't know. I need to get out. I need to see someone. I need to breathe fresh air, do something. And we subscribed to the AMC theaters. So like we could watch 3 movies a week. So what we did was one of us would pick the other up and we would go to the movies pretty much like 3 times a week because it was the only place we knew where to go because also it's like it's a new town, a new country, and we don't know anything. We don't know
Mm,
where things are. We're still learning. Even driving is different. Everything's so different. So the only place we knew where to go was the AMC theaters. So we used to watch movies and many movies, and sometimes rewatch the same movie just to get out of the house. So like it got to a point that I think I've watched every movie that came out for those 4 months. It was pretty much the only thing that and you know what? Peaches, the dog that they still have. She would spend the day with me, so like I could cuddle with her, and animals always made me feel better. But it was so hard. It was also around the time that was my mom's birthday. It was the first time in my life that I wasn't there for her birthday. It was so many things happened while I was away. I graduated from college. I went to film school. I graduated while I was in the States, so I couldn't even go and get my diploma. Um, my mom's birthday, all my friends graduating, my friends getting married, and especially my family getting sick. The day that I get a little emotional talking about this, but um, when I decided to leave, I had pretty much a whole year to prepare. And 2 months before I left home, my grandpa got really sick, like incredibly sick, and we couldn't find out what it was. Like we couldn't figure out. The doctors couldn't figure out what it was, and I told my mom, and I was like, I don't think I can go because I'm very close to my family. I'm very, very close. And she turned to me and she was like, you have to go. Like your grandpa would want you to go. And so we were supposed to have like a big goodbye party for me because Brazilians, we party in every single way about everything. So they were supposed to be throwing a party, but my grandpa was like not even able to get out of bed and he was so, so sick. And I remember I went to him and I was like, if you want, I can stay. I don't have to go, like I don't want to leave and lose you, and he just told me he wants me to go. He wants me to explore and be happy. And for a miracle, they found out what was happening to him 1 month after I moved to the US. So Thank God he didn't die, but it was so stressful. And also, then I think it was 3 months. Everything happened in those first 6 months that I was in the US. You know, my uncle got a terminal disease. He got terminal cancer, and it was awful for the entire family. And then 5 months in to me being there, also, my boyfriend at the time, who I was with for 5 years, broke up with me and through FaceTime in the shittiest possible way. So everything in my life was falling apart. And I was still working, taking care of the kids. I was still dealing with the fact that trying to get used to a new country. And yeah, it was just a lot. And I had never had to experience anything by myself because I was very loved in Brazil. You know, I had my mom, I had my friends, I had my family, and I saw myself with nothing, no support at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very hard. That's all incredibly hard. Just one individual one would be hard to deal with, but it's almost like everything really, fell apart all at once. And I can relate, Um, in 2020, my dad was hit by a car and he sustained a very traumatic brain injury. And since it was during COVID, I wasn't allowed to see him. And I was, forced to move myself and my brother to college all by ourselves. And that sucked. And it was just 5 hours away, but it was still moving. It was a new place. We didn't know anybody. And while my dad was dying in the hospital, my mom was saying that she was the only one allowed to go see him because of COVID rules. So I only got to see my dad like a handful of times, and I was very close with my dad. Daddy's girl 100%. And while he was in the hospital, my mom's dad, my grandpa, suddenly died of a stroke. So that was in July of 2021. And then my dad died in November of 2021.
I'm so
And
sorry.
yeah, it was really, really sad. And then a couple months later, my other grandpa died of a stroke. So it was one right after the other, and I was devastated. So I can relate to that feeling of there's nothing that I can do. If I could do something, I would, but it's so helpless.
Exactly. I'm so sorry you went through all that too.
Yeah.
It's such a weird feeling because I felt so much regret too about leaving. Now I don't anymore, but it was like I had a good life, you know. I had I lived in a good apartment with my mom, my dog, my cat. I had a 5-year relationship, like he was with me from the moment that I was in the lowest of my depression, that I was having, problems with self-harm and suicidal thoughts, and like the lowest of the lowest. He was through he was with me through me accepting to go to therapy because it's very much of a taboo back home and for my mom too. Then I had to accept going to medication too. So he was with me through all the steps, when an aunt of mine, which I was very close to, passed away during COVID too, and it was in another town, so I couldn't go and I couldn't say goodbye, and it caused so many problems. So he was with me through all that, and I had such supportive friends. I had such a um, how do you say that in English? But I just had a little like bubble that was so protected and so cozy, and I felt so safe. And when it's like I decided to follow my dream because it was always a big dream of mine to go abroad and experience the world, and everything was crumbling and falling apart. So it was like I remember when he broke up with me, it felt like a divorce, and it felt like a grief of myself because I didn't remember how it was to be alone. I didn't remember how it was to be single, how it was to deal with everything by myself. Because I always had him for the past 5 years. It's a long time. It was from when I was 17 all the way until I was 23. And it was just like, who am I? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why did I ever leave? Things could have been stable, but I wanted more for me. I wanted more for my family. I wanted more than what my country could offer for me at that point. And all that while dealing with such cultural differences that I didn't even think would happen, because I I went to college. I have good English. I speak 4 languages. Have I'm an extrovert. So I thought that coming to the US, it would be similar to what my life was back home. But I didn't realize how different it is. Like I remember the day that I arrived, I was so exhausted because it was a 9-hour flight and everything. And in Brazil, when you meet someone, the first thing you do, you hug. Like we're huggers. And usually like one kiss of the cheek or two, like, but usually it's a hug. And the first thing my host mom did was she extended her hand to me. And I looked at that and I was like, oh, it's not really a hugger. And I was like, is this her or is this people here? So she shook my hand. And for me, my head is like, for me, shaking your hand is when you're, like finalizing a deal, like, signing a contract or something. And, with time, I realized that people on the East Coast, at least my experience is, they're a little bit colder. They're more, they enjoy their space more. They are more cold compared to what I was used to. Things like eating habits, like my diet completely changed because I was very used to having very natural food, like rice, beans, meat, vegetables every single day. And then they ate a lot of frozen food. They ate a lot of the was different. The taste of the water was different. There were for the first time I experienced like hearing words that I didn't understand what they were. I remember the first time I went to a store, the person said, "Oh, have a good one." I had never heard that in my life. They didn't teach me this in English school back in Brazil. So I remember coming home, to my host parents. I was like, "What does that person mean when they say have a good one?" Just like it's small things like that, and also bigger things like just feeling like I never belong, and always having also um the xenophobia, the prejudice, like it's a little bit like of a curve of the topic, but in Brazil I'm considered white because we see color different. It's usually like black, mixed, white, native. And I remember, like I talking to people and they're like, "You're not white, you're Latina." And I was like, "But what does that mean?" Like what does it mean to be Latina? Because does it mean anyone in Latin America? Am I just like, like I speak Portuguese. Most Latinos speak Spanish because, Brazil is pretty much the only country in South America that speaks Portuguese. So we're not all the same. And then I'm being told that I belong in this group. And it's just like, I never really thought about it, but it was so weird for me. And people treated me different because of it. They treated me different because I was a Latina. And I was like, oh, so that's a thing too. So now I have to deal with being homesick, all the problems, getting used to it, the language, the culture. Now, for the first time, I'm experiencing xenophobia. For the first time, I'm being judged by being an immigrant. And that was, for me, mind blowing. I had never experienced that in my life.
Girl, oh my goodness. Yeah, for whatever reason, America is obsessed with race. And I
Right.
mean this so very much because my dad's side of the family are immigrants. They're from Jamaica. And
Mhm.
Jamaica's mantra is out of many, one. And when, Jamaica was a colony, just like how Brazil was a colony of Portugal, Jamaica was a colony of the UK for a very long time. And so there were lots of slaves, And if a slave had a baby with a masa, the baby was called mulatto, meaning they're mixed race. And then you had all these different whatever. But over time, Jamaica was like, no, we're just all one people. We can't keep separating ourselves by race, because it started a lot of prejudice and it started a lot of just, ridiculousness. And so I came from like the culture, because I'm mixed race. I came from the culture of my Mimi and Papa telling me that I was mixed race, and to, appreciate how different each and every sibling that I had looked, and each and every cousin that I had looked. We all look so very different. We have some similar facial characteristics, but our skin color, our hair texture, our height, our weight is all very different. And I was raised to love that and appreciate that to the utmost, of just being like, look, we got these traits from this family member, or we got this traits from this family member. But it wasn't until I started going to elementary school and being told that I was white. And I had like the most, like, what? Little Grace was like, no, I'm not. And I would get like bullied. They're like, no, you're white. You're just pretending you're black. I was like, but I'm not black either. It's like,
God.
I'm not anything. We would call ourselves Jamericans, so Jamaican Americans. Like, I'm a Jamaican, I'm mixed. And they'd be like, okay, mixed with what? And I was like, it's a long list of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. Like, do you have the
Yes.
time? Like, I'm mixed. I don't want to be called white or black or mulatto or anything like that. I'm a mixed race person. And that was my identity as a kid. It was part of my identity, was to, be so happy about where my family came from, the struggles that they went through to get here in America to make a better life. Like, my Mimi and Papa had 4 boys, and, they came from a very small island that had hardly any opportunity, to Florida. And they worked their way up and they did the best they could. So their 2 oldest sons became doctors. Like, they became, the American dream. And I really respected that, because, as a little kid, I thought that was awesome that my daddy was an immigrant, and that my daddy worked very, very hard to get where he was. And my dad had to fight, because he was a mixed race man, and there are like special privileges for and grants and stuff like that here in the United States for people of color, so POCs and mixed race people, because there was a lot of businesses back in the day, if you were Latinx, Latina, whatever, Black, whatever, that you couldn't get certain businesses, because this is a white nation. It's still a fucking white nation, let's be honest. It still is. The United States is still very much a white nation. And there's a lot of prejudice. There's a lot of prejudice against immigrants in general, because they're like, oh, they're stealing our jobs. I'm like, bitch, what job? You want to take you
Bitch,
want
shut
to
the
take
fuck up.
yeah, like, you want to take that job, really? The job that these immigrants are working so hard over and getting paid below minimum wage. You're wanting to take that job.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh my God.
But my dad, he wanted to get this grant for Black entrepreneurs, because my dad owned 3 businesses. And he was like, okay, I'm going to do everything in my power to apply for this grant. And they denied him, and they said he was white. And he was like, no. He's like, no, I'm I'm half black. And they're like, no, you look white. He's like, no, I'm not. So he literally got a DNA test and showed it to them and was like, I am not a white man. I am half a black man. Can you please allow me to get this grant? And eventually he did get the grant, but he had to fight for it. And I don't know. It was so has always been so weird ever since, I kind of got out of my own family unit and into, the world as a whole, and being treated differently because I was mixed. Like, when I was in college, they started treating me differently when I um told people that I was mixed, which is also really weird. So, like, this is my grandfather. So this is my dad's father, this man. That's little me,
Oh, yeah.
baby me.
Oh, I love this picture.
And then this is my daddy before he died. Oh, oh,
Oh, we have a little cat too.
yes, this was Clark. Let me turn off the light so people can see. Go, go, go. Turn off. Oh, oh, daddy.
Oh, I
I
love
love
that.
I loved my dad. My dad was amazing, but my mom, she's just a white woman. It's okay. But also, when I don't know, one thing that I don't speak to my mother. Let me first say that she's not a nice woman. She's not a good person. Um, when I was in high school, I had a boyfriend who went to Jamaica with his friends, and so he had a Jamaican like tank top on. And my mom saw this and she pointed out to us, she's like, "Oh, do you like Jamaica?" And he was like, "Yeah, I've gone. I like the beaches." And she's like, "Well, my daughter likes to think she's more Jamaican than she actually is." And I looked at her like, "What does that even mean?" And she's like, "You try to act like you're more mixed than you actually are." Like, what does that mean? And I felt so insulted because it felt like she was erasing a part of my identity, my ancestry. And she was intentionally trying to. She would belittle Jamaicans and all the time, my entire childhood. And you know what's like ridiculous, ridiculous? When I hear some tea,
Oh,
when
please.
when my dad died, she refused to go to his funeral. And she had my dad cremated, but she didn't tell any of us kids. And she decided to go on a 2 week long cruise, the Bahamas, Jamaica, whatever, spread his ashes there without her children, and then go on another trip to like the Grand Canyon, spread some of his ashes there, and then go to Los Angeles, spread some of his ashes there, and then spread some of his ashes in our backyard without any of us knowing.
That is so disrespectful.
It's
That's insane.
the amount of just like what because she would complain about how much she hated Jamaica like my entire childhood, and she went on a cruise to Jamaica and the Bahamas and she took her boyfriend,
Oh my God.
and now she's married to him. She got engaged to him and got married to him within 2 months.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't talk to my dad, so I get that. I went no contact with my dad 1 month before I left to the US. Him and I, we always had trouble. I believe that my dad has something undiagnosed, and I've talked about this with my American host mom because he's a lawyer for mentally ill people. So she has worked with people from all, everything that you can possibly imagine, from psychopaths to personality disorders to everything. So I told her everything about my life because we were very close, still are. And we were always trying to just diagnose him because he is definitely a narcissist. He thinks the world revolves around him, and there's like so many layers to my dad. I could spend hours just talking about the theories I have on my dad, but he came from a very different family than my mom. My mom came from a very poor family. My grandpa is black, and my grandma is white, descendant of Italians, and my grandpa is descendant of slaves. So my entire family is very mixed, and they come from a very poor background. Like my grandpa's grandpa was actually a slave at a slave farm in Brazil back when there were slave farms, and they escaped. He escaped with a bunch of people, and they created a little town that my grandpa ended up growing up in. And like his background is he literally comes from people that escaped slavery, from being sold and bred for money and power and everything. So he has pictures of his house that his dad built from scratch, from the ground. Um, he has been a farmer his entire life. You know, my mom could never go to college because he couldn't afford. You know, the only thing that he could afford was moving out of the farm and into the bigger city, which is still a really, really small rural city, um, to give her education, proper education when she was a kid. And my grandma comes from a long lineage of Italians and Germans, so she was this very white girl, and he was, you know, he was a black man, and they had kids of all colors. Like that's, you know, like I identify a lot with what you were saying, like because for me it was always like that. You know, I have an uncle that's black, and I have my mom that's white but gets really tanned. Like everyone is like a different color, and I love that. And my dad comes from a very different family. They come from a family mostly. He comes from a family mostly of white descent, Portuguese, mostly. Only besides my grandma, because her great great grandmother was actually native to Brazil, so she was indigenous, and she was actually stolen, kidnapped, and forced to marry a Portuguese man. So if I stop to think about all the people that come and made who I am, it's a mix of everything. And at the same time, it has really sad stories, it has really nice stories. Like we have a kidnapped indigenous woman who was forced to marry a Portuguese man. We have someone that escaped slavery. We have someone that just wanted new opportunities and went to Brazil, which is where my Italian heritage comes. But my dad came from a rich background because, you know, his family was wealthy compared to my mom's. And he always wanted me to be a lawyer. He always wanted me to follow the path and make, you know, the name of the family, you know, make him proud, make the family proud. And when I told him that I was going one to film school, and then later that I was moving to be an au pair, a nanny, he called me and he said I was a disgrace to the family, that it was disgraceful that I was going abroad to take care of other people's kids. He said that it was um, he just said the most awful things you can possibly imagine. And that's like 1% of my trauma with him, but it was just like the last drop because he literally said, it's humiliating for me that you're going to be an au pair. It's humiliating that you're going to another country to be a nanny. Like this is outrageous. And he said, you're not going. And I'm like, you don't get a choice. I'm 23 years old. I live with my mom. We barely have any contact. You don't decide things for me anymore. And he went on a rampage about how awful I was, how disgrace I was. He just went on and on and on and on. And I told him, like, this is the last straw. Like, I cannot deal with this anymore. I am moving countries. This is not something to be ashamed of. I'm proud that I have the courage to even get out of the country, that I have the courage to start over and while living in someone else's house. And, you know, like this is the opportunity of a lifetime. This is an opportunity that you couldn't provide for me, that anyone couldn't provide for me. I'm providing it for myself because I paid for it. I paid for my exchange program. So it's been a year and a half and I haven't talked to him. So I super understand that sometimes it really is the best thing to cut them off. But at the same time, um, it's a little hard because, you know, his birthday comes and it's still weird sometimes to not say anything. And I cut his entire family out of my life because they are also all narcissistic, horrible human beings. And it's already hard enough to be abroad and to live here and, you know, do everything that I do. And I didn't want to add one more layer of something hard for me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when it comes to a parent, cutting off a parent, it's so very difficult because that person is a part of you. You know, it's like almost if you have a parent that's constantly belittling you, negating what you want for your life, and telling you that you are worthless, which my mother would do all the time, it destroys a part of your soul that the only way that you can like heal from that is to remove them completely from your life and not have any contact with them, because to continue to talk to them is like stabbing you again and again and again and again and again, because it's almost like this person who created you is saying that they made a mistake when they made you.
Yeah.
That's
And it's complicated, because I wanted to break a cycle. Because here's the thing, my family on my dad's side has never had to work to get things. Either they married rich or they used the money that my grandpa had. On my mom's side, it's completely opposite. They always had to fight so much and work so much to get what they have. And um, I'm the first one in the family to learn English, which I think it's something that I'm so proud of, and that my entire family is so proud of. I'm the first in my family to move abroad to the U.S. My uncle has lived in Italy before, and also something very personal, but that I finally started opening up to talk about this past year, after talking to my mom, is my mom and I were both survivors of domestic abuse, domestic violence. My dad and my mom were married um, for 12 years, I think. I was 8, almost 9 when they got a divorce. And I was very little when the abuse started on my mom. Especially, like, I say that the physical violence is awful, of course it is, but it was also like a psychological torture. He did everything he possibly could to put her down and to put me down. And when they were getting a divorce, he was having an affair and still didn't want to give her the divorce because he would not admit that he was having an affair, and he wanted the control. He wanted the power over her, over me. And one of my first childhood memories, which it's for me, it's unbelievable. That's one of my first childhood memories, is him throwing my mom down the stairs, and just yelling at her and saying awful things. I grew up with him saying, "You're just like your mother," like if that was an awful thing. And he stole all of our money within, he didn't pay child support. So everything was so awful. I made a TikTok the other day, and I do this thing that I joke about my trauma because it's my way of coping with things. But when I was 15, he tried to kill me by literally shoving my face into a wall on my birthday. And in Brazil, it's like, the sweet 16, it's our 15-year birthday. And he just shoved my face against the wall and choked me. And I beat him up and we fought and everything. But so I realized that if I stayed and if I let my life go around a man, because I was very obsessed, not obsessed, but I was very dependent of my boyfriend at the time, that I was afraid that I would fall into the same cycle that my mom did. Because I'm very subjective, like I'm very easily dependent. So if someone gives me love and affection, I will do anything. And I know that because I've done a lot of therapy. So when I moved, it was like I'm finally breaking the cycle of, of violence. I'm breaking the cycle of dependency. I'm breaking the cycle of um, the fear that I had of what people would think of me, of like the consequences. I just went and I developed, of course, new fears and new problems. So it was like, it was also good to have this fresh start. So it was like I was going no contact. I was breaking all the cycles and this things that I have been chained to for so long. And I got the ability to do that in another place. And um yeah, that was a lot to unpack. I just realized I just trauma dumped a little bit.
Well, that's what this is for. But it feels good to get it all out and talk about these things, because, you are not alone. You are not alone. You have gone through so much. And I'm genuinely so glad that you're still here on this earth. Like, because a lot of people, you were talking about earlier how you self-harmed and you had suicidal thoughts. I'm glad that you're still here.
Thank you. It's good to hear that because I have this thing that I talk to my therapist all the time that I never give myself enough credit. I don't see the value in the things that I do, and I'm trying to change that because I spent a year and a half without seeing my mom because I moved to the US and then I'm straight out of the US. I came to Italy. And so I haven't been to Brazil in a year and a half. And so she came to visit me for 2 weeks and she looked at me and she was like, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, for what? I am currently on like the most anxious I've have been in so long. I am so depressed. I have no money because you get paid very little as an au pair, and I can't provide as much as I wanted to. I am like stuck in this cycle of like self destruction, and you're telling me you're proud of me for what? Like I was like, I don't understand. And she was like, no, 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 no. You're not seeing. You left your comfort zone. You left the place where you felt safe to start over. And then you started over again twice in two different countries in less than a year. Like you have, I've traveled to France, I've traveled to the UK, I've traveled all over Italy, I travel all over the US. And she was like, you are doing stuff. Like you say that you're not capable of things, but you're still doing it. That's why I say like I have depression and everything, but I'm very high function. Um, but it was just like so crazy to me because I also haven't told her like 1% of what I've been through since I left. But you know, I started smoking, like, vape. It was started with vape, like in the US to release the stress because, I was working and living in the same place I was working. And I was just like trying to adjust. And then I moved to Italy. And here things have been 10 times harder because my Italian is still like basic intermediate, and Italians are not very they have their little bubbles and they don't really open that bubble for expats, as they say. They don't really say immigrants, they say like expats to join. So you feel very lonely, and I was feeling very lonely. And the only thing that a lot of people here smoke, and a lot of people here, especially in the north, do drugs. So I started like drinking a lot. For the first 3 months that I was here, I was drinking heavily and I was smoking heavily, smoking weed, smoking everything. And I haven't told this to my mom, and she doesn't speak English, so it's fine. She won't know. But it was just like it got to a point that I was doing anything I could possibly do to feel a little bit better, to feel like I belonged. And that meant smoking, that meant drinking heavily, that meant partying a lot. Like I'm the type of girl that likes to go to bed at around 9. I like that's me. I literally that. I like sleeping early. I like staying in and watching movies, but I was so lonely and I felt so isolated that the only thing that I felt connected to was through doing drugs with people, drinking with people, and also like um having one night stands and something casual because I missed physical touch. I missed intimacy. I missed love, and I miss being held and just talked to and cared because it's so isolated. And I live in a small town near Rome. So it's even more isolating because no one here speaks English. And so, like, I have no friends here. My best friend is the kid that I take care of, who is a 3-year-old, So it's like, oh, I have friends and I have family that always like, I'll post a picture on Instagram and they'll be like, oh, look at you, you're in Naples. Look how beautiful. Oh my God, you're getting paid in euros. Oh my God, but you did this travel and you posted this picture of these people. And I'm like, okay, but what you're not seeing also is that I have developed social anxiety due to the fact that I spend more time with a kid and I talk more with the kid than I talk with adults. So I have developed social anxiety talking to adults. I have developed this, it's so hard for me now to interact with people without drinking. You know, I became addicted to nicotine. Like I quit, you know, like 2 months ago, I quit smoking, but you know, and I toned it down the drinking after New Year's. And, you know, like I'm going through all this stuff, and people just see the nice picture. They see the, oh, you're getting paid in euros. Oh, you are traveling, you're doing this, but no one sees that, you know, I'm having panic attacks over the fact that um, that I'm away from everyone and everything that I know, that I've developed new things, new mental problems while I was here. And this is not just me, you know, like I've talked to my friends about it, that are also immigrants. And I, you know, like they all also connected to this, you know, not everyone, of course, but.
You're talking about how Italy, everybody looks at it on social media. They see your social media, they're like, oh yeah, she's doing great. She's doing awesome. But they don't really, check in with you to see how you're actually doing.
It's like, how dare you complain when you're living in Italy? How dare you complain when you're living in the US? How dare you complain about, you know? And I'm like, okay, so just because I live in a destination that many people find it beautiful and have only visited for a little while or have only seen the movies, I can't say anything. Like I have been discriminated so much in, you know, both the places I've lived. I remember my mom came here. I have this strategy, which sounds even crazier, that whenever I'm in a new country, I don't speak at all. I just stay like very mute because they won't see my accent or realize I don't speak that well. So they won't be able to judge me. So they won't be able to be like, oh, look, she's from somewhere else. So, you know, I can treat her worse, or I can charge her more, or I can make her work for less. Um, and that's one of the things that, you know, tried to explain to my mom when she came here. She was like, I'm not doing that. Fuck that. She was like, I'm not, you know, trying to hide who I am to, you know, please other people. And I was like, I know she's right, but at the same time, she's staying here for 2 weeks. I live here. I have to deal with this every day. So we went into a store in Rome, and we were speaking Portuguese to each other. And I noticed this woman following us. She followed us inside the store easily for 20 minutes without saying a word, just following us around. And I was like, Mom, we're being followed. Just look at that. I want to leave the store because I feel uncomfortable. I went to a Sephora in Naples, and the guy literally came to me and was like, I need to look at your bag, because he heard me speaking Portuguese with my mom. So he was like, I need to look at your bag. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't know. I think you might have taken something. And I was like, I'm sorry. Where is this coming from? And I opened it. I was like, this is from Kiko. I only have things from Kiko. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, this is not what you wanted. So it's like it goes from being seen as less, and then the dating is just awful too, because Brazilians are seen as this, like, you know, big butt, like beautiful guitar like body, you know, like we're so sexualized, and I had no idea. I had no idea, because in Brazil, we're just Brazilians. We're just dating other Brazilians. I was so sexualized, both here in Italy and in the US, to the point that, like, I never thought I would hear such disgusting things wherever I went. It was just like, I would say, like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And I'm like, oh, where are you from? Brazil. And they were like, oh, I love Brazilian women. You guys are so hot, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, they automatically automatically assume that we are easy, and that we are only there for sex, and that we're just objects. Um, and it's not only the men, it's also like the women, because I have a friend that she has Italian citizenship. She speaks Italian. She's been an Italian citizen for many years. And one time, this lady was talking to her. She was like, oh, I noticed you're speaking another language. What language was that? And she was like, oh, I'm speaking Portuguese. And she was like, oh, from Portugal or Brazil? And she goes, oh, Brazil. And she was like, oh, so what are you doing here in Italy? Are you a hooker? Like this woman that she has never seen in her life, literally asking my friend if she's a hooker because she's from Brazil. I have had men ask me how much I charge based only on that, the fact that I'm Brazilian.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was a frat boy, by the way, because I lived next to a frat house when I was in the US.
Huh.
I'll never forget this. Mm-hmm.
Dude, the audacity
The
of so many people. I don't know. I genuinely don't understand any of it, any of these like preconceived notions about any race. Like it's just it it legitimately doesn't make any sense to me at all that they think they can say these things just because of your race.
it's wild to me to this day that the questions that I have gotten, and just like the way I've been mocked, made out to be this joke, even among people that were supposed to be my friends. And I'm not talking about the immigrants. It's mostly about like people from the country itself. Like I lived next to a frat house when I was in New Jersey, and one time they were like, "Oh, you want to come over? We're doing a bonfire." And I was like, sure, because like we also see in the movies that in college, there's the sororities and the frat house, and I got curious, like it was like I'm in an exchange program and I have the opportunity to see a frat house. This sounds fun. And when I got there, it was just like 10 men drinking beer, around their 20s, watching a bonfire. And they were like, "Oh, so you're not from here, right?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And they asked me, "Oh, where are you from?" From Brazil. And they're like, "Oh, so I know a little Spanish." They try to speak Spanish with me, and I was like, "Oh, I do speak Spanish because I took lessons, but my country speaks Portuguese." And they're like, "Oh," and I see them getting curious, but sometimes I feel like it's just a ignorance kind of curious. So like it's you don't have the knowledge, you never thought about it, and some of them are mean. And in the beginning, I thought it was just that ignorance and not really being mean. So I was like, "You can ask me stuff, I'll answer you." And it started off with like, "Oh, do you live in the Amazon? Do you live in the jungle?" And then it started going to like, "Oh, how do you deal with monkeys and anacondas?" And, "Oh, so you live close to Bolivia. And so you live close to Colombia. So do you do a lot of cocaine?" And it got to a point that one of them was like, "Oh, I want to ask you something." And I was like, "Sure, ask away." And he was like, "Do you have a Brazilian wax? Is everyone in Brazil does everyone in Brazil have a Brazilian wax? Because I think that's very hard." And I've never, and then he was like, "I never fucked a Latina." So I was wondering. And I just looked at him and I was like, this man they've met me for like 15 minutes and they're asking such personal questions about my body. Like, and it was just like, I feel like they thought it was easy prey. I don't know. But like, this is the situations that I have encountered. I the whole being so sexualized and made a fetish of and made a joke of at the same time, and you see that in TV shows, you see that everywhere because I love Modern Family, but you see how much Sofia Vergara get mocked because of her English, how sexualized she is by being Colombian, because Colombians and Brazilians are so sexualized, it's crazy. So it's like this is us. This is what people think of us, that we're all hot and easy and um, just like blow up dolls. Like we don't have feelings. We don't have our own problems. So I stayed single I've been single since my ex because I can't find anyone that won't treat me like this exotic like trophy girl. Like I feel it in being I don't know how to say, but it's just like I have a friend that she has a boyfriend that's American, and the first time they had a real argument, like a real bad argument, he looks at her and says, "You can barely speak English. You have such an accent, it annoys me." And it's like it's her second language, you know. And he was just aggressively pointing out like something like that. So it's like even it's just hard. And, you know, I've tried going out with people ever since I've been single, but every time it's like the craziest thing that I hear from men. And it's just like, that's what I feel like. I feel like they love having this exotic um, trophy to show off or to tell that they've had it, you know.
That's just
Mm-hmm.
like you're not a human. Like you're just
Not at all.
that's so
Mm-hmm.
it's so gross.
Mm-hmm.
It's so gross. It's so sad. It makes me so sad for you.
Yeah, and it's like I did, you know, meet nice guys along the way, but at the same time, I have such a hard time connecting because it's like they'll be like, oh, my family comes from a poor background too. And then what he considers poor is what I consider middle class back home. So it's just the difference, the cultural differences, sometimes it's really hard if the person is not open to seeing because I like I had to explain this to a guy I was seeing. I told him like, when you think of poverty, you don't think of the poverty that I think, because in my country, my mom, okay, I had a good life. Okay, I went to private school, I went to college, I had never had any like real bad financial problems. But my mom grew up in a farm in the middle of nowhere, Brazil, where she would go from church to home, guiding herself by the light of the moon because they didn't have like electricity poles along the way on like this dirt road, walking like miles, guiding herself by the light of the moon, you know. She will not eat eggs because sometimes it was one of the main source of food because they had chicken. So I was like, you know, like there's this big problem in like when you say poverty, you think eating like things that are not that are like off brand or like, you know, close to like expired. I'm talking about a level of poverty that you don't know. And I was trying to explain to this guy that I was seeing, I was like, my aunt, when I told her that there was poor people in the US, she was like, what do you mean? And I told her, I was like, there's homeless people here too. There's poverty here too. It's just different from back home. And she told me, she was like, well, I've never seen it because what we see in the movies, it's not, there's no, you know. So I had to tell my family that their view of the US was wrong because what we get fed is a different type of propaganda, you know, like, and of course there is the good part of it. Of course there's, you know, like the amazing cool things to do. But when I was telling my aunt that, you know, like I was walking down New York City and there was many homeless people, this like strong smell of pee, and, you know, like the streets are dirty and the subway is crazy. And, you know, she was just like, I can't believe this. I would never imagine that. I would never imagine that if you didn't tell me. I would die not knowing this. And they just think very differently, you know. I used to take the New Jersey Transit from New Jersey to New York City too, and in my head, I felt so safe because, you know, there is of course violence back home, but I feel like it's a very different type of violence. It's more like people rob because they need money, you know, for drugs, food, whatever it is. I was more afraid of getting robbed back home than anything else. And this one time at the New Jersey Transit, I was sitting with my friends coming back from Halloween, and one of my friends, she sits and she's paralyzed. She's just staring at something and she won't speak at all. So I turned to her and I was like, what's wrong? Like, you stop talking and you're just, I was like, look at me, what's wrong? And she was like, there is a guy standing right in front of me, masturbating while looking at us. And I was like I looked and I saw and I wanted to throw up immediately. Like I wanted to throw up immediately, but I was like, okay, we're not safe. Get up, get out, get out. And I told my two other friends that were in front of us, I was like, don't look behind you, just walk, don't look. So they just walked and we went all the way, kept walking. We talked to the guy that worked there and he was like, okay, we'll try to find him. But he left in the first stop that he saw. But it's like when I tell this to people from back home, they're like, oh, there's no way that this happened in the US, in like close to New York City, there's no way. And I was like, yeah, there is. There is, like the world is not what you think it is. It's just you're just fed propaganda, like a different experience, you know?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, I've been to New York. There's some crazy things that happen in New York. Some
Mm-hmm.
craziness. And yeah, there is a lot of poverty. I live in Texas, and there is a lot of poverty here. There are a lot of homeless people, especially where I lived in Dallas. Under every single highway, there's like little homeless encampment, and they have their little Walmart tents, and they're begging on the side of the road for money. And there's so many people here that are disenfranchised, whether it because they went on drugs, or it's because they have come from another country and they couldn't acclimate, or because they got kicked out of their house or their living situation and they don't know what else to do. There's so many different stories of all these people, and there's no real thing put in place in the United States to, number one, protect these people, number two, like provide something for them that they can actually get better and move forward, because it requires so much money to live here. So much money to live here. Like the amount of money for a single week's worth of groceries has gone up like 5 different times in the last couple years. It's so expensive. Like a box of cereal is like $8, and so many different people are on food stamps. It's not great. And I was born here, and I'm a person who has disabilities, and I can't get a job. I've tried. Like 2 years ago, I applied to 53 jobs in 1 year. Like almost every weekend, I was going in up like for a job interview, and they see me and my service dog, and they're like, no, because I would be seen as like a liability. If I had a seizure on the
Yeah,
job, I could apply for workers' compensation, and they don't want to do that. They're like, nah, we're
of
not going
course
to do it.
not.
So it's so frustrating. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to start my own little business. So, the podcast, I also make and sell beaded crystal jewelry. And I also teach voice and acting lessons, because that's what I got to do. I'm doing 3 different things all at once. And I had like a lot of, you know, people tell me, "Oh, why don't you just go get a job?" I'm like, "What job? I'm trying." They don't want someone like me. They want someone that they think is more capable. And that's fine. I'm gonna work for myself. And they're like, "Well, it's a lot harder to work for yourself." Like, yeah, I know. You don't know, but I know. You're just like, "Oh, there's so much things to do." Yeah, I know. I sell my jewelry every weekend at vendor markets. And last weekend I made the most money I ever made before. But I couldn't even pay myself, because I had to, pay for the event, because you have to rent a space. I had to pay for the event. I had to pay like back my credit cards on the supplies that I bought. And then I had to pay for my gas. And I'm like, I don't have any money left over. Uh-oh. There's no way I could pay myself. So I basically did all of this for free, essentially. And that sucks.
Oh, fuck yes, that sucks. And I get that so much because it's like, for example, being an au pair in the US, you get paid $200 a week. And they sell this idea to us that it's like, oh, you're going to the US, but it's not a work exchange program. It is like, you'll be able to travel, $200 is like 3,000 reais, which, you know, like when you convert, you think, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. But you're not spending reais, you're spending dollars. But, you know, that's not something you think until you get there and you get paid. And they're like, here, you know, most families don't use the 45 hours that you have to work to get paid the 200, you know, like it's like a fixed price. It doesn't change. You get paid $200 whatever hours you work. I work 25, 35, but my friends worked 45. And I realized that like I was cheap labor very like late on. Like when I was, I don't know, I think it was like 5, 6, like 7 months in the US. I had this moment that I was going out with this guy in New York City, very nice guy, an immigrant too. We're still friends, and you know, one time he said, and we were lying down in his bed, and I looked at him and I was like, "How much is like minimum wage here? Like, how much people get paid an hour?" And he told me, and I was like, "I get paid $5 an hour to be an au pair." And he was like, "No, you're not. That's illegal." And I was like, "No, no, no, that's what I get paid." And he was like, "Okay, but how? How is it possible?" And then we just started talking about it. And I was like, oh, so they hide this program behind saying it's an exchange program, but which just cheap immigrant labor, because most of the au pairs come from South America. Most of the au pairs are Latinas, and most of them want a better life. And most of them are sold this amazing dream that is like, oh, you're going to the US for a whole year and you're going to get paid this amount and you're going to be able to study at a university and you're going to be able to travel and, you know, live the American dream. That's what they sell to us. And then we get there and we're being overworked and abused and underpaid. You know, my situation was very different. I was very lucky to get a good family, but I have friends that were kicked out. One was almost deported because she became pretty much homeless when the agency wouldn't take her and the family kicked her out. So I just realized how much immigrants in general, being au pairs or not, you know, just like illegally or illegally, how we're easily abused and put into dangerous situations, and especially like financially abused. Like you get paid much less because you're an immigrant. Once I started having this type of experience, and after I started talking to other people that were like, oh, well, a nanny should be paid at least $20 an hour. You're getting paid $5 an hour. Oh, you have a flexible schedule. They can put you to work at any time on weekends, on holidays. Well, that's not for us citizens. Like if you're, oh, you know, and then I met like the cleaning lady from the place that I lived. She was Brazilian and she's illegal and she's been in the US for easily 15 years. Her mom has been there for 30 years illegally. And, you know, they can never like, it's just a really hard process to get green card and legalized. And then she looked at me and she was like, you don't understand the things I've been through and the things I've been said and like how they will try to make me pay less for just like my shitty English, you know, something like that. There was also this time that they were remodeling the basement in the house that I lived, and the constructor, the owner was American and your typical white guy, and all his workers were Latinos that only spoke Spanish, pretty much. So he was asking me, oh, does the thing go here? Blah, blah. And we started talking. He was like, you have an amazing English. And I was like, yeah, thank you. I was very privileged to have English lessons since I was very little. So I've been, you know, studying English since I was 3 years old. And he was like, oh, I wish more immigrants were like you, because it's unbelievable to me that these people have been here for 10, 25 years, doesn't matter how many years, and they always speak Spanish. Like, and he was like, this is America. They should be speaking English. And I was like, do you give them the opportunity to learn English? Do you give them the opportunity to like get out of the little bubble that they built to survive abroad? Because here's the thing, you don't speak anything else. You speak only English. They speak Spanish and somehow manage to work in English. You know, I was like astonished, you know? Jeez.
I mean, it is astonishing because I have tried very hard to learn Spanish. I'm dyslexic. So I can learn like sounds and stuff like that, but I can't read. like the way normal people can read. And so when I was in high school and college, I took Japanese because it was easy for me. Kanji, romanji, like the symbols, very, very easy for me to understand. And when I went to
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tech University, they were like, "Oh, we're not going to take your Japanese. You have to take Spanish." And I was like, uh, okay. And I tried and I tried and I tried and I would cry, 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 cry because they wanted me to write in Spanish. And I was like, I can speak some of it kind of, but I can't write. I'm sorry, I can't. You please look at my accommodations. It says right here that I'm dyslexic. And the teacher just didn't care. She was from Spain. And so we were learning
Mm-hmm.
like Spanish. We weren't learning um, you know, Mexican Spanish, which is very different because I'm in Texas, so we border Mexico. So I've heard,
Mm-hmm.
Spanish my whole life. And I know a little bit in conversational. It was so very different. And I just kept crying in class, like openly weeping in class because I couldn't understand. Which is it sounds so pathetic, but I tried so hard. I'm like, it sounds so beautiful, but I can't understand. I was trying and I like signed up for tutoring and everything. And I couldn't get it. And so I understand from the point of view of some people who can't get it, who have learning disabilities like myself. But if you are hiring people who speak, mostly this language, you should learn some of the language. You really
Yeah, and
should.
probably underpaying them,
Oh yeah, they're definitely
you
underpaying
know.
them. They like that's I hate to say it, but that is, an everyday practice. It's such an everyday practice that one of my siblings, he's about to graduate college, and he was talking about how he wanted to run a construction business. He was more like joking. And I was like, okay, well, who are you going to hire? And he's like, I'm going to hire only Mexicans. He's like, and I know Spanish, so they're going to love me. I'm like, okay, why are you only going to hire Mexicans? He's like, because I don't have to pay them as much as I have to pay Americans. I'm like, bro, you know how messed up that sounds? He's like, yes, I do, but I want to make money. He's that
But
type
this is
of,
America.
yeah, he's that type of person to be like, he's like, I'll pay them $1 more than all the other places are paying them, but it's still underpaid. And dude,
Dude,
you're messed
it
up.
I laugh because like this is honestly the reality of like capitalism and uh, America is the like epicenter, is like the biggest thing you can think of when you think of capitalism. And it's just like even like it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's how the world runs. But it really be like that, like if you can underpay someone, especially because they're an immigrant, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. And it's like I remember too, I did babysitting a lot all over the world. Everywhere I go, I babysit because I'm good with kids. And I remember this lady being like, "Oh, but you charge this much? But are you even a professional nanny? Like like isn't like are you like from Brazil or something?" And it's like people will try to underpay you for any reason. And something that I forgot to talk about, but I think it's something important when it comes to talking about immigration and how it affects your mental health, is just bureaucracy and how hard it is to maintain yourself legally, and how to just immigrate in general when it comes to thinking about it as a financial slash like the financial aspect of it, and just the whole like logistics of it. So for example, in the US, I had I think it was a J1 visa, or yes, I can't remember, but it was a visa for au pairs. And once that visa is over, which is 1 year, you have two options. You can extend that and turn that into a status, and stay one more year, still as an au pair. But with a visa, you can leave the country. Like if I wanted to visit Brazil in my first year as a pair, I could. In the second year, I couldn't because it wasn't a visa; it was a status. And once that status is over for the second year of the au pair, you can change it to a tourist or a student status if you want to remain in the U.S. To stay as a student, you need to prove that you have around $25,000 in your bank account because you need to prove funds, okay? And as a tourist, it's around $6,000. So, and also you can legally work with neither the status because they're just either just studying or you're just being a tourist. And the only way to work legally is either through the EB3 visa, which is a underqualified work visa. I don't remember the specifics, but you apply for it. It takes 3 to 5 years for you to get a green card, being paid very, very low, and needing to work for the same employer that is sponsoring you for the entirety of those 3 to 5 years. Or you apply for asylum, which is also a complicated thing because if the judge tells you, if the judge comes to you and be like, okay, you don't get asylum, then you don't get asylum, then you get deported. And the other option is marriage. That's why there's also like TV shows like 90 Days Fiance, which I find fascinating. But and that was like the situation in the US. I say this because many of my friends stayed and tried to immigrate, but you can only be legally for a certain time, and then what do you do when your student visa is done? What do you do when your tourist visa is done? Not visa status, when both of them are done, and they're all like expensive. You have to pay for all these fees and everything in taxes. And then I thought, okay, in Italy, it can't be that bad, like because everyone talks about immigration to the US because it's huge country. There's also so many people immigrating there all the time and so many immigrants, and you think like, okay, Europe can't be that hard either. Like it can't be this hard. So I'm lucky that I have Italian heritage because I qualify for citizenship through bloodline. So even though I'm 5 generations after my Italian ancestor, I can still apply for citizenship, and it's what I'm doing here. That's why I came to Italy. What they don't tell you is that will cost a shit ton of money, that will cost so many hours of arguing with people. And you can either do the process in Italy or in Brazil. In Brazil, it takes years. In Italy, it takes less. So I've been here for 6 months trying to get it. And it's been hell because people will not try to speak any other language with you. You will try to speak Italian with them and they will be so fucking rude, because some people here, they don't think that we should have the right to get the citizenship. And then it's like, you have to apply for a permesso di soggiorno, which is like a document that allows you to stay in the country for more than 3 months. And then you have to apply with the paperwork that costs $2,000. And then you have to apply for a contract for your residency, which is 200 euros. And then you have to apply for this and that and this and that. And it becomes this thing where you're always fighting the arguing with the government, or like in its instances, like you're always arguing with the township, you're always arguing with, everything, and spending so much money while just trying to get to maintain your life there. And I remember my first month here, I had to get my Codice Fiscale, which is like what a social security number is in the US. So I could apply for my residency here. So my host mom, that I live with, she was like, hey, I'll go with you because I'm Italian, I speak Italian. So I'll go with you. So we went to the agency, the branch of the government that does that. And they looked at me and the guy was like, okay, so let me tell you something. You don't get the Codice Fiscale because you don't have a residency and you don't have a permesso di soggiorno. And I was like, okay, but to get the residency, I need to get the Codice Fiscale, and to get the permesso di soggiorno, I need the residency, and I need to have applied for the citizenship. But to apply for the citizenship, I need to have this. So it became like this cycle, and he was just like making all these excuses. And it got to a point that I was so frustrated because I was like trying to get it done and I couldn't get it done. And then we had to literally talk to the cops, for the cops to go to the agency and be like, hey, she's legally right. Like, you have to legally do this. And the guy said that he didn't want to do my Código Fiscal because I am a foreigner and an immigrant, and that he was afraid that I would commit any crimes and have like my name tied to like Italy and their government and have like the official like social security number of Italy. He was just like, I don't know, because like I don't think it's right. He thought that I was like illegally trying to immigrate and was going to commit crimes and stuff. So it was like from day one, xenophobia, you know, and then it's like all the money, all the paperwork, and doing all that in a language that I can't speak. So I can't speak for myself. I can't fight for myself. In Portuguese, I can speak for myself. I can fight for myself. In English too, in Spanish too, because I've studied for so long. But even in English, sometimes it gets terrifying to talk to, you know, someone that is there as a citizen and you're not, because there's always this voice in the back of your head. It's like, they're gonna send you back, they're gonna deport you, they're gonna do this, they're gonna arrest you, you know, like even when you've done nothing wrong, there's still this little voice in your head that is like, this person knows they have more power over me and there's nothing I can do about it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Girl, I'm so proud of you though. You're fighting, and I'm so proud of you. I am. You're gonna get it. You're gonna get what you want. Okay? I can
Thank
feel
you.
it. I can feel it. You will. And it'll mean so much more to you because you fought for it. And dude, I know Italian is very hard to learn, but I can see the determination within you, and I think you got it. I do. I know it's going to
Thank
be
you.
very hard, but I think you got it because those that are as determined as you are the success stories. From my perspective as, child of an immigrant, the ones that work so very hard to get where they're gonna, eventually get are the ones that appreciate it more and show so much more compassion, love, and understanding for everybody else because they know they've worked, they've done it. So I'm genuinely very proud of you.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear. You
Loki
know,
Wong, get down. Sorry. Get down. 1 second. Loki Wong.
no worries.
Here, I'll show you him. He big fat man. Cool.
Oh, I love cats so much. Look at that.
This is
I just want to rub
Loki.
my face.
Loki, say hello.
Hi, Loki. He's just like, Mom, put me down right now.
Well, I have
He's
like
like,
a wall over there that has all my pins, like collector's pins that you put on jackets and stuff. And he took one off, and I don't know
uh,
where it went. And he was trying to take another one off because he's a little butthole. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna steal mom's pins. This is a little
oh my,
dingleberry. So that's why I had to
I
yell at
love
him.
that.
So I'm like, Loki, stop.
Oh, I totally get it. As a also mom dog and cat mom and dog mom, I understand. But
Yeah.
you know, it's very nice to be able to talk about it because um I think everyone's hearing your story too, you know, about your dad being an immigrant, because I feel like everyone has such a unique experience being an immigrant. Um, and we all go through amazing stories, but also awful stories. You know, like in the same time that I was having, you know, like um, seasonal depression and dealing with my breakup, and also suffering xenophobia, and going through all the horrible situations that I did, I also got to live many of my dreams. Like I got to visit Los Angeles, which was my biggest dream since I was a kid, and I got to follow my favorite band on tour, which is Metallica. I'm even wearing a Metallica shirt that I bought at the concert.
What? You got to go, dude. That is really cool. That's so
I
cool.
saw 6 concerts. Yeah, in
Man.
1 month. Girl, it was amazing. And it was just like I did my first travel to Europe. I went to Europe for the first time when I was an immigrant in the US. I got to see my favorite band. I got to visit new places. I got to make to see snow for the first time, even though I hate it. But I saw snow for the first time. So it's always like, at the same time that you're living amazing experiences, you're also living experiences that only people that been through understand it. Just like I had this talk with my therapist the other day, because my uncle that got sick with terminal cancer when I was in the US, he died 1 month after I moved to Italy.
I'm sorry for
And
your loss.
thank you. It was really hard. And I wasn't there for any part of his treatment. And I remember I was in Milan visiting my only friend here. I was visiting him, and I got on the train, and halfway through the trip, I got a call from my mom, and she said, he's gone. And I just started crying. So I was in this train crying by myself, like weeping. Like it was like such a painful cry. And the only thing I could say to her was, I'm so sorry. And it wasn't like in a I'm sorry for your loss. It was like, I'm sorry that I wasn't there. I'm sorry that I didn't do enough. I felt like I was so, I don't know, like I felt like I should be there. I should have done more, even though I know there was nothing I could do and there wouldn't be a difference about it. I just kept apologizing to her, to my aunt, his wife, and my cousin who's 16 and lost his dad. The only thing I could do was apologize. I was like, I'm so sorry that I'm here. I'm so sorry that I'm not there for you guys. I'm so sorry. And then when I got home, my bosses picked me up and they were super nice about it, but I just felt so alone and I just felt so guilty. And I remember I talked to my therapist and I was like, there's this pain that I don't know why I'm apologizing. Like, I know I shouldn't be apologizing because it's not my fault that I left. And I feel so alone and so isolated. And I feel like I'm not grieving right or something. It feels weird. Everything feels wrong. And she was talking to me and she said, Carol, you need to understand that they are grieving, but they're grieving all together. They have each other's back. They have each other's to hug. They can hug each other. They can say goodbye. They can go to the funeral. They can say goodbye to their loved one. You don't get that. The only thing you get is like you can call them, but no one's hugging you. No one is taking care of you. No one is there for you because they physically cannot, so you need to understand that there's no reason for you to apologize and that it's okay for you to feel this incredible pain of losing someone you love, but also understanding that you're going through that alone. I've met people that have lost their parents while they were illegally in the US and they could not go to their parents' funeral. And it was the first time that I really thought like, holy shit, I really am alone. And I really am grieving alone and going through this alone because I chose to leave, you know? And that made me connect even more with my other uncle who left Brazil when he had a wife. He still has the same wife, but I have an uncle that got married, had one kid, my cousin as me, and then his wife got pregnant, but their family situation was they were so poor, they had no money at all that he decided to go to Italy and try life here and get his citizenship. He spent 10 years here and um his dad, my grandpa, had a stroke and had many other like almost death experiences, and he was there, and he was like, I can't go and spend a week taking care of my dad who raised me and took care of me because I need to be here. So, we met my cousin through Skype at the time with like the shittiest internet connection ever. She grew up without having her family around, he lost so many moments here. And I called him and I was like, now I understand you. Now I understand why you went back. Now I understand your pain. Because dude, it's fucking hard. You really are alone. And it's isolating, it's exhausting because you're always fighting. You'll never stop fighting here. You're fighting to get your papers, you're fighting to get the job, you're fighting to make the money. And at the same time that, like, oh, I'm in Italy or I'm in the US, it's still extremely isolating. Yeah, I talk a lot. I'm sorry. I just keep going, like it's just, oh, you're muted.
Don't apologize because this is your time. This is your time
Sorry.
to talk about these things. I mean, this is what you're on here for, right? I connected with you because I wanted to hear your story because you know, I saw some of your TikToks and I thought that they were awesome. And, you're like, oh, I have dark humor. But underneath that dark humor is someone who has been through so much that they're using that humor to cope with what they've gone through. And I wanted to hear your story. And I'm so grateful that you're sharing and you have such a willingness to talk about all of it, all the different aspects. And, you know, when people hear it, a lot of people are going to relate. A lot of people are going to feel seen by what you've experienced. That's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to identify trauma and how we can help heal ourselves and help heal others, because trauma is not who you are, it's what you go through. And when we go through such traumatic experiences, we often think that, oh, this is all it is. I am the trauma. You are not the trauma. We go through the trauma. The trauma does become a part of us, but it isn't our entire identity. And so it's good to talk about these things, to be open about these things, because if we're not, if we isolate, either, willingly or we have no other choice, if we're isolated, it becomes even more all-consuming and we don't have an outlet. This whole podcast is supposed to be an outlet for people to share their experiences and connect with others. And you're doing just that. And I couldn't be more blessed as, even a listener, because I'm listening. And when I edit this, I'm going to be listening even more of how strong you have been and how resilient you have been to endure all of this and continue to keep moving forward and not give up. I'm in awe of you. I'm inspired by you. And stories like you give me hope, because you being willing to share what you've gone through gives me hope that maybe someone else will hear your story and be willing to share. And that will spur someone else hearing their story and be willing to share. And if we have more openness to talk about these things, it will become less stigmatized. And that's my goal. That's my goal.
I think you're doing a great job because, when you invited me, I took a look at your podcast and I listened to the last episode about, Stockholm syndrome. And I was just like, it's so good to hear people's experience, because I feel like we live in an age that, and I know this is said so much, but it's very true that everything is very fake and everything is portrayed very beautifully. It's like, Instagram and, TikTok and social media, and just like how we present ourselves, it's in a very favorable, and just nothing seems real. So like, I thought that I was a failure for so long in my life. And I was like, oh, they have trauma too. oh, they go through similar things. It might not be the same, but oh, this person experienced anxiety, you know. And for many years, I grew up with depression. I grew up with so many problems, you know, with my dad and with being different, just that it took me years and took me so much therapy to understand that it's what you said, trauma is not who I am. You know, the problems that I have, the traumas, the mental ones, everything, it's not who I am, but it's part of what I went through. It's part of makes me who I am. And it's not that like, oh, thank God I went through that. Thank God I suffered all through that. You know what I mean? Um, it's also just that's why I'm being more open now about talking about all my traumas and all my problems. Is that why I'm open about the domestic violence abuse that I went through, my problems with my dad, about my relationship problems, and being and talking about how moving countries, it's not just a dream, because I want people to know that even though it's really hard, you can still do it. You know, even though there are days that I wake up and I wonder why I'm even here. Not only like in this country, but alive. Moments that I wonder if the panic attacks will go away, if the anxiety will ever go away, if I will, you know, then I remember that I've been through it. That, you know, my therapist always says that life is like a roller coaster. You're gonna have really bad moments, but you're gonna have really good ones. You're gonna have just stable ones. And the important thing is to understand that you will always go to the other side. You will always get through it. You know, no matter how bad it is, how good it is. Like we're like, she said, like we're like bamboo. Like we'll fold, but we don't break. You know, like we'll go to the deepest, lowest, you know, hit our rock bottoms, but we can find a way to get back on our feet, to get out of that hole that either we dug ourselves or got thrown in it. You know, and I had this realization that I think I'm doing good when it was my cousin's birthday last month. She's turning 10, and she's such a sweet kid. And I called her and I was like, "Happy birthday! I miss you so much. You know, I can't wait to see you again." But Carol, Carol's like traveling. You know, I'm doing my thing, but I will go home and see you and hug you, and like just want you to know that I love you, and whatever I can do for you, I will do. And she turned to me and she was like, "I want to be just like you when I grow up. I want to be just like you." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "I'm studying English and I'm going to be the second one in the family to speak English. I want to speak English just like you. I want to travel the world just like you. And I want to be brave just like you." So like this 10-year-old who I saw be born and, like grow up, and she sees me in such a good light that I don't shine that light on myself. She sees me with such a different light that I see myself.
Mhm.
And you got to be grateful, because I am very glad that, I get to inspire her. And I have cousins of all ages, and they always tell me like, "Oh, I want to, like," because I used to have crazy hair, like pink hair. I had bitch, like, all the blondes, all the colors. I got tattoos. I'm the first in the family to get tattoos. I was the first in the family to paint my hair. I was the first in the family to learn English. The first cousin to go to college, because I did have my uncles and aunts to go to college, but I was the first cousin of the cousins, the nephews and nieces to go to college, to move abroad and experience all that, and to have my cousins be inspired by that and tell me that, and it's just like, and I was like, that's what I want. I want people to know that doesn't matter the shit they've been through, they can do whatever the fuck they want. You know, um, if you want to stay in your own hometown, stay. If you want to get married right now, get married right now. If you want to travel the world, travel the world. You'll find your own way. Like I wasn't rich. I didn't just like, poof, money popped up and I traveled the world. I worked really fucking hard, and um here I am, you know what I mean? Like anyone can do whatever the fuck they want, as long as you just gotta be happy, and as long as it makes you happy. And it's okay to change your mind too. I think that's really important, because for so long I thought that I would be back in Brazil, dating the same boyfriend, living the same life that I did, that I wouldn't accomplish any of my dreams. Um and I'm here now. I've been to the US. I've met my idols. You know, like I went and I saw Metallica live and I met James Hetfield. I met the guys from Metallica, which is something that like for a Brazilian fan from Latam, you know, like this is so hard, so impossible to do. And you know, like off topic, but you know, like I'm a big Metallica fan too because I feel like they saved my life. Because I was a kid slash teenager that was going through so much shit, and here I was listening to James Hetfield sing about Fade to Black, you know, that it's a song about suicide. And I was like, oh my God, there are people that feel depressed and feel sad and feel suicidal and everything. And I was like, okay, so I'm not the only one. Here I am, like a 12-year-old being like, okay, I'm not gonna die because he didn't die. He's still here. You know, he's still there. He has kids, he has a family, he plays music to the world and he writes this beautiful song. And then it was so fulfilling when I was at the show and he talks about being depressed and you know, feeling suicidal. He was like, this song is about that. And seek help. Like you can do it. And then, you know, him just watching him play, and I'm like, okay, 12-year-old Carol didn't thought she would make it out of Brazil, out of depression, out of these thoughts, and now she's in front of James Hetfield, in front of Metallica, playing the song that saved her life in the US, you know? So yeah, I just think it's nice for people to know. And I think that's why I loved seeing your podcast, and I'm so glad to be talking to you because I think it's so important for people to see stories and relate or not and see like, okay, it is possible to get out. You know, it is possible to do it. You know, the trauma doesn't make you who you are. It doesn't define you. It is just, it's part of you, but it's not you know?
Mm-hmm. And you can overcome anything. Really, you can. And it takes a lot of effort, but you can. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Carol. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm blessed to know you now. I will message you and every so often be random, send you a couple memes because I would like to be your friend.
Oh, please do. I love it.
Yeah. Yes, making some new friends. But yeah, I again am so inspired by your story. I'm inspired by what you've gone through. And for those of you guys listening, like if you need support, please join us on our Discord. If you need support, please reach out for support. And if someone you reach out to can't provide it, okay, move on to the next person, move on to the next person, move on to the next person, because you will find people who love you and want to support you. And I mean that with the deepest sincerity. Sometimes it takes, you know, finding a couple rotten ones to find the really good ones. But eventually you will find your circle. Eventually you will find your footing. And I promise you are worth the effort it takes to get better. And overcoming is a part of life. It just is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy.
If you're watching us over on YouTube, here are our memes of the week, carefully curated from the amazing people on our Discord server. Let's get into those memes. At the end of every episode, we spin our wheel of emotions to learn a new feeling and how it correlates to trauma. So let me zoom in. That was out. Hi. Every time I press the zoom in button, for whatever reason, it zooms out first, which is fine, but also a little annoying. So, ooh, disappointed. Disappointed. It landed on disappointed. We can often feel really disappointed by the people around us, especially the way that they're reacting. If the way that they're reacting didn't match our expectations, it can be super disappointing. Like in this episode, we talk to Carol about how her family had a huge misconception that once she moved to the US, everything would be great. She would make so much money. They had no idea that there was poverty in the US. And it was a really big shock to them. And it was a huge disappointment to her of how they treated her, being like, oh, well, you're in the US now. Like, everything is fine now. You don't have any worries. And they didn't really check in on her and make sure that she was doing okay mentally. You know, life is full of ups and downs, disappointments, challenges that we must overcome. And I'm honestly very proud of her. A way that we can really combat disappointment is not limiting our expectations, but managing our expectations. You know, accepting things for what they are and cherishing the things that we didn't expect that went our way. For me, that has been super challenging, especially when, I moved here to our new house. I had the expectation that I would make friends with my neighbors, and I've tried to meet a couple people, and a lot of them are not really nice. Like, I was walking my dogs on the street, and, my dog pooped, and as I was going for a bag, my neighbor came out and screamed at me that my dog pooped in not even his yard, but pooped like on the sidewalk. She didn't poop on the sidewalk, but there was like a grass section. And I was like, I have a bag. He's like, are you going to pick it up? I'm like, yes. It was weird. It was just such a weird interaction, which I have to, manage my own expectation of. Maybe he's dealt with a lot of people in the neighborhood not picking up their dog's poop. That probably frustrated him a lot. So I just have to go about it with grace and keep moving forward, Yeah, it was a little disappointing to be yelled at for something that I didn't even do anything wrong. But that's life. And we got to keep it pushing. Okay? And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for being here. This podcast seeks to forge a strong community. So please come join our Discord, share with others, get podcast updates, make some friends, talk about your trauma. It's anonymous, it's free. It has a lot of mental health resources on there because we wish to create a place where you can be heard. So please don't hesitate to join us because you are needed and we want to appreciate you and support you in whatever way we can. And if you'd like to support our podcast, we have a Patreon. Different tiers can get you a bracelet. That's a handmade bracelet made by me, Grace. Or you can get a sticker like the one on the back of my computer. We also have a bonfire where you can get custom apparel designed by yours truly. So this is a shirt that I designed. It says, "Be kind to your mind." And let me zoom out so you can see it. Bloop! Be kind to your mind. Yeah, I designed this t-shirt. Pretty cool. On the back, it says the Trauma Dump Podcast. Ooh. So you can get that shirt on Bonfire. All the links are in the description. Any support helps us out a lot. So if you feel compelled to, please like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends. It really, really means a lot to me. Remember, you are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise again from the ashes and be filled with peace, hope, love, joy, and understanding. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Mwah! Goodbye!